protesters took to the streets today. This is day 48 of Occupy Los Angeles, and you're watching Inside Out News.
Once again, you have until 4:10 to leave the green space, or you'll be subject to private person's arrest. Thank you.
Solidarity forever! Solidarity forever! Solidarity forever! The movement makes us strong!
Protests began this morning at 7 a.m. Over 1,000 protesters gathered in the financial district to march over to 4th and Flower, where they set up tents in the middle of the street. At 8:30 a.m., their permit expired, and the police asked the protesters to move onto the sidewalk. Over a dozen protesters remain in the center of the street. They formed a human chain. They were chanting, and the police again asked them to move out or they would be arrested.
Being at all assembly and in the name of the people of North California, command all those assembled at 4th and Figueroa, the area bounded by Oak Street on the east, the 110 freeway on the west, 3rd Street on the north, 4th Street on the south, to merely disperse, which means to break up this assembly. If you do not do so, you may be arrested or subject to other police action. Other police action may include the use of less lethal munitions, which could cause significant, for instance, serious injury to those who remain. Section 409 of the Penal Code prohibits remaining present at an unlawful assembly. If you remain in the area which was just described, regardless of your purpose in remaining, you will be in violation of Section 409 PC.
They chose to remain in a symbolic protest. Their act of civil disobedience was their form of protest, their way of getting attention from the media. So they were arrested there. But that was just the beginning of today's actions. At noon, the occupiers from Occupy Los Angeles planned a second march. They had over 500 demonstrators march from City Hall over to the Bank of America corporate office in the financial district. While that was going on, a smaller group of protesters met over on 4th and Flower. They brought tents with them, they brought signs with them. Their plan was to use the march as a diversion so that they could come up from behind a hill just over here and set up camp on the lawn right behind me at the Bank of America Plaza. I was there with them, and I followed them as they made it up through the hill and into the grass.
Sisters, brothers and sisters, we have taken the same property, or owned by the same owners, as Ducati Park.
Down with Brookfield Properties.
We told them that if you mess with our brothers, we would have their back. We told you all to be smart, to be peaceful, and to be organized, and unified. And this action took unity, organization, discipline, and nonviolence. To hold this property, it's going to require us to show that discipline, to show that nonviolence. Rest assured that the cops are going to try to evict us from this location. We are now putting Plan A in place. The mayor is receiving right now phone calls from civil rights leaders, from labor leaders, from religious leaders, letting them know, keep your hands off Occupy. Now it doesn't mean that that's not going to happen. So I want everybody to be aware. Being here, you risk being arrested.
At 4 p.m., the police gave notice to the occupiers who had set up camp in the lawn area where they had several tents. The police told them that at 4:10 p.m. they would have to leave the lawn or they would be arrested. Outside of this group of about 15 protesters, they had protesters sitting on the floor in front of the police who were in riot gear. There was over 100 police officers here in riot gear. Some of them had these foam bullets in canisters, which one of the police officers told me that the way that they use them is they aim them down at the ground and then they pop up, and it's really as a way to create, to disperse the crowd, to scare the crowd. They're not actually aimed at the protesters. They're not beanbags that they shoot at protesters. So they had those canisters ready. They did not have tear gas on them. They only had these foam rubber bullets. The protesters were prepared for tear gas. They were prepared for pepper spray. Some of them had vinegar napkins that they were rubbing on cloth that they could wrap against their mouth, that they could use to wipe their eyes if they were pepper sprayed. A few others had water bottles filled with a concoction of Maalox and water. It's something like 50% water, 50% Maalox. And this mixture is supposed to help remove any pepper spray or tear gas from the protesters' eyes. This was used in Zuccotti Park earlier in the week when they were evicted. There was an 80-something-year-old woman. There's pictures on the internet of her with the Maalox concoction being poured into her eyes. So the protesters here were prepared for that type of incident should it happen, but it did not happen because it was a very peaceful arrest. The protesters were peaceful, aside from two young men who came from behind the media and started a bit of confrontation with the police. They were physically pressed down on the ground. It was a rather violent arrest. But aside from that, the actual protesters were very peaceful. They were chanting, they were cheering. They had members of the clergy come out, and we have an interview with one of the rabbis that was there that we can show you really. Why have members of the clergy of various faiths come out today to this occupation here at the Bank of America?
Because we recognize that the people who are coming here because of a deep sense of frustration with the way that the society has built itself on a culture of greed, where there's 1% of the people that control most of the wealth and the 99%, metaphorically, who don't. And that the people here, the anger of the people here is real. On the other hand, we're also hoping that the police and that this comes to a peaceful resolution, that we don't see the same violence that we saw in other places in the country here. So we're coming here to hopefully be a force for peace and to support the occupiers' desire for a more equitable distribution of resources and a different notion of community in this country.
Do you think the occupiers' goal of being arrested is beneficial for the movement?
It could be. I think that at some point in time, getting arrested peacefully shows that the laws that are in place are not to the benefit of the people, and therefore some people have to show that by being in jail.
And does it make any difference whether or not this is a private or public property in terms of the effectiveness of the arrest?
That's something that's a good question. I mean, I think the fact that it's at Bank of America with all that Bank of America has done is a targeted property. I think Bank of America is one of the great malfeasants in this situation, and therefore the message that's being sent, which is that you can't be a corporation and act in a completely unjustified manner foreclosing on houses, and at the same time double dealing in your financial transactions, et cetera, and so forth, and be considered a good corporate citizen. And what the people here are saying is that to be a good corporate citizen, to be a part of the community, means that you have to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. And so far, Bank of America has been part of the problem.
Are any of the members of the clergy planning to be arrested today?
Not that I know of. We're here as a peaceful force.
When the police moved in to make the arrests, they told the media that we had to move back because that the area was private property and that they would not see us as members of the press. They would see us as equal to the protesters, despite the fact that we all had press credentials. They told us that they would arrest us if we did not move out of the area. As you can see, he is pointing the baton at the press. There's about 10 of us here who are press, and they have turned and have their batons pointed on us. They're saying it's private property, and they're threatening us. They told us they were going to do us a favor in allowing us a piece of the grass to stand there behind the police to continue filming. So we were able to remain on the property. The chief or the captain, he said he was doing us a favor by allowing us to stay on the property so that we could continue to report the arrests. Earlier, quickly I should mention, when the protesters moved in to the park, the police in riot gear moved in. There was over 100 police in riot gear. They moved in. First, they were about 5 feet away. Then they moved in until about up to the shoulders of the police of the protesters. One of the police officers in riot gear took his baton and tapped the back of one of the protesters to test his reaction. I've been told by the protesters that is how they determine how they will take out any of the protesters and arrest them. When he did that, the police officer next to him pulled him back and told him to stand down. After about 20 minutes, the police in riot gear backed off and moved out of the grass area. The protesters thought that they had won a victory at that point, that they might actually be able to stay and hold a candlelight vigil for 24 hours. Obviously, as we stated, they were arrested. The commander of the LAPD is saying that 40 protesters were arrested tonight here at the Bank of America Plaza. The police moved out their tents before they arrested the protesters, and then they dispersed the rest of the crowd. Pretty much everyone has now left the plaza. The police have left now. The over 100 or so police who are in riot gear have moved out of the area. We talked to one of the police officers casually toward the end of the arrests, and he was very sympathetic to the cause of the protesters. In fact, I asked him if he was getting overtime, and he told me that they do not get overtime. What they get is they build up hours which they can later on use for sick time or vacation time. Their hours have been cut back. They were supposed to work until 2 p.m. today, and after 2 p.m. they've been working for free. The police officers who I spoke to told me that they understood what the message of the protests were about, that they felt that they belong to the 99%, that what they're fighting for does affect them, and that they appreciate what they're doing. What their concern was is that what they wanted the protesters to know is that they're not there for the banks. They're there to keep the peace, to keep people safe, and that's where these police officers are coming from. As I said, they are sympathetic. In fact, they understand that a lot of the injustice that is going on, that these occupiers are protesting against, have directly affected them in terms of their hours, in terms of their pay cut. They've taken at least a $20,000 pay cut, and they understand. But again, they have to do their job. They have to enforce the law. So that's essentially what went down today in downtown Los Angeles. It was a day-long protest filled with some surprises, with the protesters moving in and trying to make camp here at Bank of America. There were arrests this morning. And in other parts of the country, what was happening here in Los Angeles was happening in other major cities. In New York, they shut down the city essentially with their protests. So this movement, this Occupy movement, is only growing more powerful. The city has said that right now, Occupy Los Angeles is the biggest encampment in the nation since Zuccotti Park was cleared out. But despite the fact that Zuccotti Park has been cleared out, despite the fact that Occupy Chicago has been cleared out, Portland, Oakland, San Diego, they still return to the streets and they still continue their protest. So it seems like these occupiers are here to stay and that they're going to continue protesting, that they're going to continue marching until they see what they deem the right kind of change in politics, in government, in the country, with corporations, until they see that that actually happens. And as we've said in the past, we will continue to report on these issues. We will continue to follow the occupation movement, and we will be here for as long as we can. This is Margot Paez signing off for Inside Out News. Good night.